And welcome once again to the Liberty Lounge. I'm Johnny B. Thank you for finding us however you did, whether you're listening or watching. I am joined with my friend Jared of Guns and Gadgets. Those of y'all on the podcast, he's waving at you. And then also Anthony, the arms scholar out in California. Jared, what are you carrying on your person today? What is your EDC firearm today?
Staccato CS is on me right now.
Staccato CS. You've been carrying that one.
Bougie.
Yeah, I know, bougie. For the rest of us peasants, it's out of our weight class. You've been on that one a while. How you liking it?
I love it. I am thoroughly in the 2011 camp now. It is a cheat code. We went to the class at Valor Ridge with our friend Reed Hendricks. I had my XL. It's a cheat code. It's a tack driver. I could shoot it as fast as I could possibly shoot it, and it just fell right back on with that integral comp. This is shorter, but it's the same trigger. It's phenomenal. Great gun. They make good stuff.
Anthony, I know that you rotate in your firearms in and out a lot like I do. What's your carry this week?
It's been just my basic Glock 19. However, last weekend I got out of 10-day jail. Now it's not new to you guys. It's been on the market forever, but it's finally available to us in California. I got a M&P 2.0 carry. Finally got it out of jail. I'm going to be sending that over to agency for a crisp $1,500 for them to do their workup on that. And I'm excited to run that once it comes in. One of my buddies, Kyle Manzano from Manzano Tactical, he has a bunch of their M&Ps that he brings to classes and you can shoot. And oh my gosh, those agency work that they do on those. Oh.
I hope you post that to Instagram. I love taking a really good firearm, sending it off and making it better. I think that's absolutely fantastic. All right. There's an idea, and if y'all will excuse the language, peeing down my leg and then telling me it's raining. That's an idiom, and there's people that will, y'all know the old thing, when you wave one hand up in the air, watch this hand, watch this hand, watch this hand, and they slap you with the other hand. Really, really common. Jared, you are a little ticked off about this one, and we were talking over lunch, and you got me fired up. Up in New England, we have politicians, excuse the language, but tinkling down our leg and telling us it's raining.
Well, it's actually Pennsylvania, but this did happen in Massachusetts as well. I am ripped. When we finish this podcast recording, I'm going to go hit record at my studio because this has got me insanely upset. And I'm gonna read something if that's cool. And I'm sure our editor will put it on the screen to make it easy for you all. There's a bill that made it through the House in Pennsylvania yesterday. It's House Bill 777. Surmise it. It's the ghost gun ban for Pennsylvania. And it passed. And 3 Republicans voted for this bill. Now, I'll preface this by saying that I understand the side that FOAC, which is Firearms Owners Against Crime, it's their state 2A org. I understand their stance, and I spoke with their president today. However, I would rather have my representatives who we vote for to be our representative against these types of bills to go down swinging, to use a sports term. Take the loss if you have to, but go down fighting rather than bending over to keep your job. And I'm going to read this to you. This is what they put out yesterday as their official statement, FOAC. Regardless of the flaws in the bill, regardless of the constitutional challenges raised by the just and correct legislators of the Commonwealth, regardless of the history of this nation, House Bill 777 passed today on the floor of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. I would encourage members to realize that Republicans who voted in favor of this bill did so knowing they would lose their seats if they did not.
Heaven forbid they lose their seat and do their freaking job.
If they don't stand for the Second Amendment, they deserve to lose their seat. All right, so I'll continue. Not because they wanted to vote for it. I would encourage members to understand that even with those 3 Republicans voting against the bill, it would have passed 101 to 100, even with Democrat Frank Burns voting against the bill. Understand these Republicans know this bill will not become law because their fellow Republicans in the Senate will kill it promptly. Understand the only reason the Democrats ran this bill was to make these Republicans either vote this way and get attacked by 2A groups, which has already started, or vote our way and get attacked by their local voters over a vote they could not win. Try to remember those Republicans are in heavy Democrat districts, and we need them to stay in their seat to regain the House and stop the nonsense. More importantly, it is time to go after the Democrats ignoring the Constitution of this land. It is time to spend money and effort in replacing, and they name some folks they want replaced. It is time FOAC Institute became more active in replacing the anti-gun legislators who cower from their leftist tyrannical leadership, and remind these representatives that our right to keep and bear arms in defense of ourselves and the state shall not be questioned. And then he goes on. And
so you're telling me in the middle of them explaining, hey, here's why your elected officials voted with the Democrats, voted anti-gun, voted against the Constitution. Oh, by the way, now is the time to give us more money. Did they turn that into a commercial for cash?
They did say we need more money, and now's the time to. And how you can get involved, let us know. We'll give you the info. But for me, I'm speaking for my own personal belief in what I do. If you are a Republican, even if you're a Democrat, all right, and you love the Second Amendment, vote in favor of it. You're supposed to vote for the Constitution at all times, not vote to violate the Constitution. So the 3 Republicans who voted against it to keep their job, in my opinion, they deserve to be replaced because they're soft, they're spineless, and having that as a representation of the people got us to where we are.
The last episode when we were interviewing Brandon Herrera, who is in a runoff right now with incumbent Tony Gonzalez down in the Texas 23, in doing my homework for that, because we're personal friends with Brandon, but I wanted to learn more. So in doing my homework for that, one of the things the people in Texas 23, which is a whopper of a district, holy smokes, it's big. The people are, excuse the language again, but pissed off because Tony clearly and enthusiastically voted with the Uvalde thing and voted for pro same-sex marriage. And voters are standing up. Anthony, it seems like, and we all know this, that the left has the cameras, the left has the microphones, the left has the voice of a lot of the bigger names in D.C. But on the local level, like in Pennsylvania or in Massachusetts, Anthony, are voters getting a backbone and going to stand up to these rhinos?
I would hope so. It's unfortunate, especially on our side, that we see this happen all too often. This is not the first instance where we've had rhino Republicans jump the line to vote in favor of gun control. I mean, that's what that is. That's what their votes accounted to, is they vote in favor of gun control. Now, however they want to spin that, they can spin it, but that's what their vote is. We've seen that at the federal level with the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and we heard similar rhetoric around that about some Republicans jumping in the line for that. You know, we're doing this. It was funny. A lot of the discussion around that was Republicans are jumping the line and voting in favor of this and doing it in a bipartisan way to make sure that this is not as dangerous of a bill as it could be without us. There's always this spin instead of, hey, how about you just do what you're supposed to do and what we elected you for, which is vote against gun control, vote in favor of the Constitution, and stop worrying about holding your seat. Why as a voter should I care whether you hold your seat or not, when you in that seat, you're still not voting against the things that I want you to? It makes no difference whether you're there or not if you're voting this way. Might as well just have a Democrat there who's going to vote in favor of the bill anyways, because that's what your vote is amounted to. Now, they'll probably say, well, I mean, maybe it just signals that the Second Amendment is not a big enough issue for these specific individuals. Maybe they want them in the House so they can vote against other Democrat policies. Maybe the Second Amendment just isn't as big of a deal to them, and they're willing to compromise on this one specific issue so they can stay in place and vote, against other issues. It's a mess. And I don't have a relationship with FOAC or any of those people. I don't like this narrative that's coming out to defend these specific individuals. I think, like Jared said, I would rather them go down swinging. There is no guarantee that your vote in favor of this bill is going to ensure that you're going to remain in place. And also, why are you so worried about the Everytowns in the Giffords attacking you? If you are not prepared to take on those groups, then you don't have any reason to be in the House of any state. If you claim to be pro-gun, if you aren't prepared to take on those attacks from those groups and those crying moms, then why should we vote you? If you're that soft, why should you be in the House anyway? So that stuff upsets me. That's also why I love supporting groups like Gun Owners America, because they are no compromise. And when stuff like this pops up, especially at a federal level, when the whole bipartisan thing popped up, they were pushing all these Republicans like, no, we don't care. We don't compromise. We don't negotiate with the other side. We are a no compromise position. And that's what the Second Amendment community needs to be right now, not wishy-washy, because every time we become wishy-washy on these issues, it spins into something else. Same thing with the Bipartisan Safe Communities Act. Everybody's saying it's not that big of a deal. It wasn't that big of a deal of a piece of legislation. And then we saw the ATF try to expand upon that right now with restricting private party sales. It never goes in our favor when we compromise. That's why I support the no compromise position. I know we all do.
Yeah.
So,
and for those who might be thinking, well, maybe they should have voted to keep their job just so they can keep the House. I know for a fact that these same three voted for gun control in the past. So this isn't the first time they've done it. This is just the first time they've been caught and are getting called out by people, like Johnny said, who are pissed off. If you are listening and you think you can do better than these clowns, chances are that you can. So run for office, primary anybody who doesn't represent your beliefs or the Constitution. Let's take the country back.
You're listening to the Liberty Lounge podcast, where we talk about firearms, freedom, and fun. And apparently today we're talking about being fired up. Anthony, you've been following real closely down on the board, a little closer than I have. I think we all have a pretty good understanding. What are you fired up about down on the border this week?
There's a lot going on, and it's this last week has been interesting. I mean, I know I don't follow the news cycle as much. I've been following a lot of the legal side of the border dispute right now, probably closer than most people or most commentators have been.
That's why you're the Armed Scholar.
Yeah, because I'm a glutton for punishment. But it was interesting. You had the whole border rush issue in some of those areas, which was, I'm very concerned about where things are heading as far as that. And the legal side of things, the courts in the Fifth Circuit and the Supreme Court are not making things any better. What has developed over the last few days is this issue. So there's two main cases right now that are kind of dealing with the Texas border issue. And if you guys want a super comprehensive breakdown of that, go watch my videos on this. But you have SB4, which SB4 is a piece of legislation that Texas passed, which is essentially, the theory behind it is Texas is just reinforcing federal immigration laws. Texas is taking the stance that, hey, we are going to utilize our resources, our law enforcement, to help push what the federal government should be doing as far as arresting people who are here illegally, and then taking them to the courts, giving Texas courts the ability to issue orders of sending them back where they came from, and then delivering them to Border Patrol so that they can be sent back to the nation in which they came from. That's really all SB4 does. It caused a lot of issues. There's actually not one lawsuit. There's like 5 lawsuits that have been now consolidated in that case that has already made its way to the Supreme Court, was sent back down to the Fifth Circuit. And the ultimate result of this is, even though the Supreme Court would have left the stay in place, that would have allowed SB4 to be enforced in Texas to do these things, the Fifth Circuit has stepped in and said, no, we're not going to reinforce that stay. We're going to move towards hearing this case. We think the Biden administration, can halt SB4 in some way, that we think federal laws preempt Texas from doing this. And there was actually a very interesting dissent from one of the judges on the Fifth Circuit, where he was very concerned, which I have a lot of concerns also, about what the Fifth Circuit is saying, essentially that Texas will not be able to do anything as far as immigration on their own, because they're claiming, or at least 2 of the judges on the panel have claimed, that there has been field preemption, which is essentially that the federal government and the executive branch and Congress have consumed this field of immigration, and a state can't act on their own outside of the federal government, which is very, very interesting and troubling. This is gonna, for SB4, that issue for sure is gonna make its way back to the Supreme Court here soon. And then there's the other case, which deals with cutting the wire in the Eagle Pass area. And that one's kind of in abeyance right now, is sent back down to the lower court. It's, to sum it up, the legal battle when it comes to Texas is a cluster F. It is messed up.
I think we should do two things. First, we should have all of the judges who think the Biden administration can take over the immigration and stop Texas from protecting its own sovereignty, to move them down to the border and see how they like it. Give them free housing. We're giving everything else free to everybody else. We might as well give a judge a free house on the border and see how fast they change their tune. And then we also, I was in law enforcement for a very long time, as you guys know. My challenge to law enforcement on the border, whether it's federal border patrol or even some of the local cops who are, doing the best they can. If you don't stand for something, you will fall for everything. Do the right thing, uphold this country's laws. I don't care what your freaking sergeant or your supervisor says, because when you take the oath, you are not supposed to be following unconstitutional, illegal orders. If we had more people stand, this wouldn't be allowed to happen. That's just my opinion for somebody who did that stuff for a living.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to see that. I would love to see judges have to go live on the border, but the reality is, I feel, and I know it, they are so bleeping insulated from the real world, and not just those elites, but all of the elites. It's a very easy example. We've talked about it many times. Is everybody that signs or votes for gun control, they all have 24-hour-a-day armed security. They are 100% insulated. It gets me really upset to the point where I can't even click it on how many little girls and women are having horrific things done to them or being murdered by illegals. And I see that, and I literally can't even click it as a human, as a Christian, as a dad, as a father. And it really, really bothers me. And the people that are making the decisions for all of us are insulated against all of it. And I think it's one of the reasons why the grassroots that me and you and Anthony and all of our friends that are in this space, and the men and the women that are doing the grassroots, and all the viewers and the listeners, and they're doing stuff too. I mean, our viewers that go to work every morning and they fight in their own way. And I think once again, it's just more and more and more, Anthony bringing up the border situation, it's more and more the value in what we're doing on the grassroots. All right, I got a story for you guys. It's coming out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I guarantee y'all haven't heard this one, because it doesn't play really well. It's an audio clip. It's not a fabulous video. But what I think it is telling of the regime that we're up against. Karine Jean-Pierre, can I get a ha-ha from y'all?
Ha-ha.
Karine Jean-Pierre, she is the Oval Office mop head. She goes on to a radio show in Charlotte on WBT 99.3, Charlotte's News Talk Radio. And the gentleman that's the radio host is named Mark Garrison. And I don't know a lot about the show, but he is definitely a bro. And he has ha-ha onto his show. Now, this is really going to be brief. It's not going to be long, but listen, this is a window into the nonsense. They actually believe this. We're talking about being insulated. We're talking about being fired up, and we're talking about things that absolutely tick me off today. Radio host Mark Garrison says this. He opened the show with, hey, when I told a number of people that I was going to talk to you, it was interesting. They all said, would you please ask her, does the president have dementia? So before we move on, does he? And Jean-Pierre says, Mark, I can't even believe you're asking me this question. That is an incredibly offensive question to ask. And he says, but people ask it. Now, this is me talking. I think it's interesting that bang, she says, you can't even ask this. And she goes on, no. We're going down a rabbit hole. You're talking about the president's health. He has done more for the American people. It's incredibly insulting. And then he asks one more question. Okay, she said, can we move on? He says, all right, let's talk about gas prices and grocery prices. How can he win votes when people don't have income? And bang, she comes back again. Two things happen. One, she goes down this rabbit hole. She blames who? Who does she blame for the money situations? President Trump and Putin. And then she says, thank you very much. Have a good day. Click, and hangs up on him. My point of mentioning all that, and Jared, tell me what you think, is that Jean-Pierre goes on, and I think for a moment she cracked open the book and let us actually see what she thinks. One, you can't even ask about this child-sniffing pervert. And number two, it's not our fault, it's Trump's fault that the economy is where it's at. Does that tick you off like it does me?
100%. I mean, I've been saying this for years. Like, they are our employees. We are their employers. We should be able to know how the health is of the president or the secretary of defense or whatever. It doesn't matter. They're on our payroll. We should have that information. And the fact that she got so defensive, that's your answer. Yes, many people in this country believe he has dementia, or is at least how was the wording on the report?
Pressure.
A well-meaning elderly man with poor memory, I think was the quote on the report. But yeah, we all know that. So he's just reinforcing what we already know.
Anthony, what are we doing? We're looking at a election coming up, and I'm not a big fan of the whole lesser of two evils, because when a lesser of two evils means they're both evil. So I don't really go down that pathway. But regardless, we are dealing with two candidates that have been chosen for us on some level, both of which are going to be in their 80s during the coming term. Is it a challenge looking at the aging DC? I mentioned this on my channel about 2 years ago and talked about the aging of DC. And like my dad's 77. He's sharper than all three of us put together. They're 77 and they're 77. They're not all the same. So you can't just throw one blanket statement. But it's a challenge. Do you think ever the legislation will go through that people need to have cognitive tests when they're in office?
I don't know if that will ever go through, because it just challenges too many of the establishment people who've made their career for 50, 60 years, whatever, sitting in the House, sitting in the Senate, who maybe want to run for the president or whatever positions later in life. So I don't think anything that would ever go through. But I think it is funny how, you can't talk about the suitability of the president. You can't talk about the health and the cognition of the president of the United States. I mean, it's so absurd. Like, for no other position would there, if you're applying for any other job, would it be like, hey, it doesn't matter if you're just cognitively not there.
What do you think they had him hopped up on at the State of the Union address? Because they coked his brain. What do you think? What do you think they gave him?
Everything. I was a little surprised. He stumbled a little bit here and there, but for the most part, he was. And I actually kind of want to get your guys' take on. I'm sure you guys watched it also.
I think what they did is they let him sniff a couple 4-year-olds' hair, and away he went, because that seems to be the only thing that motivates that dirty, senile old pervert.
Well, it's also interesting too, the tone of that State of the Union. Angry. It was very, very angry, very confrontational, and I just didn't think. And I heard some people say that he had adopted or copied some of his prior speeches, and maybe they just rolled that over into this one. Johnny. But
those of y'all that are listening, when he starts talking about an angry man ranting, that makes my right hand go up in the air, because sometimes I feel like we're living in 1936 Bavaria.
It's interesting to have the discussion with friends. I don't know what your guys' feelings are going into this year, or just like as this year develops. It feels like this election year is a lot different than others. I feel like at this point of other years, we would have seen a lot of debates already coming up between the candidates and a lot more like political back and forth. But this is just haywire. The things that you are seeing playing on mainstream media, one candidate being just completely not there, sniffy, his brain is mush at this point. Trump is a felon, and all the stuff that's going on with his stuff, and whether or not he committed fraud, and what's the value of his estate. And then Jon Stewart's that was in the news cycle about Jon Stewart saying that he committed fraud, and then it's just like all these asides that are happening to, when in a normal election year there's so much more focus, at least politically, on what's actually going on in the election. And then we're dealing with all the, like we just talked about, the border and Ukraine and Russia and the Middle East and Israel. It's just, there's just so much going on right now that it does leave me a little bit concerned. And I think that's why we had the whole prepping conversation. Now, I'm not like a doom and gloom guy, but I'm just curious what your guys' like feeling is going into this election cycle, because it just feels, and obviously I'm younger than you guys, if you guys can't tell,
Thanks, pal.
Clearly,
appreciate that.
Much younger, and handsome, and still got a full head of hair.
Yeah, nice glasses.
Yeah, fake glasses. But I'm just curious, like, what is your guys' feeling this election cycle versus prior ones that you guys have followed or seen?
Well, I think for me, everything you're seeing now with, targeting one candidate as much as they can in every angle they can, and the other candidate just not there, and nobody seems to care about that. I think for me, it shows people just how damn close we are to the potential communist solidification of America. And for me, that's scary, because I can't promise my kids to be as free as I was at their age. And the fact that more Americans aren't waking up and seeing through the smoke is concerning to me. Like, it's almost like the left, the ultimate left wing, can do no wrong. No matter what they do, it's accepted.
And you cannot question it. You cannot bring anything into question that they do, say, or believe.
Right. And I was just about to say that. Like, you question them and you're some type of phobe or a racist or
extremist.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point where it's almost like if you want to defend yourself or your position, it's going to come to blows, because it's just going to be that abrasive of a situation. I'm very concerned for this year. I don't think we've seen the fireworks that will be the rest of 2024 yet. We just had a bridge taken out by a barge. We've had trains derail left and right. We've had meat packing plants, just all of them start to burn. We've had millions of chickens just happen to die. I don't think it's all coincidence. That's just me, which is why taking care of yourself and having some type of watchman, like we spoke a couple episodes ago, I think that's becoming more and more of a necessity rather than something cool.
Yeah, and I think Anthony's point, which is like, hey, as we move into election season, maybe we get a little more serious. Anthony's not a doom and gloom guy, but he's saying, hey, maybe we pay better attention to this. There is always a comedy side to all of this. The Francis Scott Key Bridge goes down, and the next day, Biden says that he, for many years, commuted across it in a train, and there's no train tracks on that bridge. So there's comedy, of course, but there's also scary things when we're talking about the number of meat packing plants that have gone down, the chicken plants that have gone down. Over and over, we keep hearing these reports of maybe the internet will be going down at some point this fall. That'll be the week of the elections. Shocking. And it just makes us all just get a little more somber, a little more serious, even if we're not doom and gloom preppers, to go, hey, you know what? I am my own first responder. The cavalry's not coming to get us. Anthony, after coming out of that prepping episode that we had 2 episodes ago, have you made any changes or any thoughts or any plans for what you're going to do next in light of all of this?
Oh, yeah. I'm just kind of in that mode in general. I was overhauling my vehicle setup because I know that was one thing that I was really lacking.
What did you do? What's one thing you did with your vehicle setup?
So right now and I was kind of working on this morning, I have a bag where so first thing I did is I had a true like kind of get home bag that I created, and I watched a lot of Nut Fancy videos and some Wrangle Star videos, a lot of those. Made a little get home bag with just a variety of things, some clothes, and it's kind of dual purpose where if I get stuck in the car, some warm weather stuff, and if I had to hump it a little bit, if I was super far away and had to get home, some basic survival stuff. And then I also am setting up a bag where it's like kind of a response, a shooting response bag, where like I'm setting up, I had just some stuff laying around and I'm using just a bunch of extras. So I have this T-Rex Arms super lightweight range belt that he had, and I had some spare Safariland QLS and systems. So I'm setting that up and I'm put some mags on that. And then I have a spare plate carrier that was kind of just sitting around, so I'm setting that up. That's just going to probably sit in the vehicle and it's a little bit more responder. So like if something happens and I'm out there and things go sideways really fast, something I can throw on quick and try to help people or help
California
my family.
Royalty, folks. California royalty. Spare plate carrier just laying around.
Yeah, I heard that. I'm like, I wish I had money because all I've got is like a dinner plate. I don't even have a plate carrier.
Hold on. Big timeout. Did you hear this dude talk about, I carry my staccato? How many staccatos do you have, Jared? Let's throw that out there.
I know the answer to this. How many staccatos do you have, Jared?
I know too.
I have 3 right now.
You
Okay, and
are a
then
blessed man.
what about other 2011s that you have? Because I saw you also had another 2011.
I have 3 of those too.
Nice try, Fit Boy. Don't ask what is in our safes.
Hey, I didn't
Hey,
ask for everything.
this bunch of fun of firearms freedoms fun and all sorts of nonsense is brought to you by our friends at blackoutcoffee.com. Hey, got good news for you. 20% off your first order, whether you want beans or whether you want it already ground up or even K-Cups available. You can get 20% off your first order. Use the link blackoutcoffee.com/liberty. Anthony, did you start your day off today with a cup of Blackout coffee, and what was the flavor?
1776, baby.
Jared, same question. What was your flavor?
Today was 2A all day.
2A all day. I opened with Brutal Awakening. Blackoutcoffee.com/liberty. And you can use the code Liberty for 20% off your first order. How exciting is that? All right, in light of that, in light of what we've been dealing with, and Anthony saying, hey, I'm starting to change things, I'm starting to move things. How are you, Jared, this summer, as we move into spring and summer, going to be getting ready for this coming fall and potential nonsense during the election cycle?
I actually had my physical this past week and turned the focus on myself. I had regular blood work done, plus I requested other tests to check other levels. And my focus is on me right now. I've increased my cardio. I've increased weights. I'm lifting more now than I was when I was in my 30s. I'm, increased my cardio by 50% over the last 3 weeks. So I need to make sure that if something does happen, I'm going to be able to perform and be that protector for my family.
Glad your performance is improving. I'm excited about that. We got good news coming out of several states. Louisiana recently became the 28th state to pass constitutional carry. South Carolina now the 29th. And then good news, I believe just yesterday or the day before, Wyoming has now passed a piece of legislation, and the governor signed it into law, saying, hey, you know what? Middle finger to the Fed. If the Fed passes any future red flag laws, we are not going to enforce it. Now, I have mixed feelings about this because I think it's fantastic to give a middle finger to the Fed. States' rights is in my heart big time. I feel bad that we come to the place where we're having to fight amongst ourselves and fight the government. I wish of the people, for the people, and by the people was something I would see in my lifetime. Anthony, this idea of a middle finger to the federal government, and I know this, I know the Fed will fight back if they need to. We always talk about secession. There's the greater Idaho movement going on right now where Idaho and parts of Oregon and parts of Washington State, maybe parts of California said, hey, they're going to get out of here. The Fed ain't going to allow that. How far can you push the Fed before they fight back with their F-16s and nukes?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, and I don't know if we're there yet, but maybe we're getting close there. I mean, I also don't like that whole discussion because the Fed and people who fly those, F-16s and all that. I mean, I live close to a naval air base, and so I know a lot of those guys. They live in houses next to me, so the concept of those guys bombing their own families is hilarious to me. It's not going to happen. There's an interesting discussion that I saw. I think it was on Joe Rogan. He had an interesting discussion with Brett Weinstein about maybe the whole border issue in military age people of other nations like China coming into the US. Maybe that is more about modifying our military because we've seen, like, for example, in LA, they are now letting illegal individuals to serve as police officers, to arrest people, to carry guns and violate citizens' constitutional rights when they're not even a citizen. And then now there's a lot of discussion about maybe that's what they're moving towards the military. Again, a little bit of tinfoil hat. But as far as like the federal government always pushes back against these laws. When states pass these types of like Second Amendment preservation laws, I mean, we saw it in Missouri. Missouri passed their own Second Amendment Preservation Act, was immediately challenged by the U.S. government. It's been going through the process. It made its way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court kicked it back down. The Eighth Circuit recently heard oral arguments on that, and we're waiting to see what develops in that one. And and the same thing also happened with Texas and their Made in Texas suppressor laws, where they said we're not going to enforce federal NFA laws. We're not going to allow any of our officers or agents to enforce those. We're going to actually punish and fine any state official who tries to enforce those. Saw that also play out with SB 8 in Texas with their abortion law, where they did the same thing, where they allowed private right of actions against individuals who are, doing certain things, aiding and abetting in certain conduct. So it's something that happens in states. A lot of states are moving towards doing that, but there's always federal pushback, and more often than not, the judicial system, the judiciary, and these circuit courts will side with the federal government, just in the say, the field of XYZ is preempted and the federal government has control over that, yada yada yada. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and those who are listening, the whole reason the federal government has any tentacle reaching into your neck of the woods is because of the Commerce Clause. And if we can get the Commerce Clause to mean exactly what it was supposed to mean, the federal government will be what it was supposed to be, which was whatever was given, the powers that were given to them in the Constitution and nothing else.
Johnny, what do you think? F-15s, bombings? You scared?
No, I really like your point that you got to remember when you throw around words like F-16s and F-15s and F-35s, those are flown by more often than not freaking patriots, and they are not going to bomb their own people. I think when the line gets drawn in the sand, our military, there is a loud minority that are a bunch of men pretending to be women. And there is a bunch, like you look at the ones that are high command, they're a bunch of morons, some of them. But I think the grunts, the pilots, the folks that are in the kitchen slinging chow, I think there's a lot of patriots. And I think when the line is drawn in the sand, there will always be 300 badges stood outside of Uvalde, and one dad said, no, F this, I'm going in. And I think when you throw the military down and they're like, hey, let's go stand against American citizens, I think there's men and women that will stand up. And I hope so. We always talk about cops, and there are some challenges. There are some power hungry B words that are out there that are willing to take anyone's rights away. But then in any force, Jared, tell me I'm wrong, in any police force, whether it's county or state or local or municipality, I think the majority of the locker room are well-intentioned and at times patriots, though there are some thugs in the mix.
Yeah, that's spot on accurate. I guess the deciding factor is when those people who are doing the right thing see one of their own doing the wrong thing, do they just accept it, or do they stand up and stop it?
It's tough because at the end of the day, your job is your job, and that's how you feed your family. And we open with folks in the politicians in Pennsylvania saying, hey, I didn't want to lose my job, and this is how we feed our families. And you've got your kids, and both of my kids are in college, so my employment is sort of important right now. And it comes down to that line in the sand. Where is the line? And nobody can set that for us except for ourselves. Was there ever a time for you on the job that you had to look at that line?
Yeah, quite a few times. I've lost jobs because I stood for principle. Because for me, it's a job; it's not life. And for me, if we don't have our rights, why would I want the damn job anyway? Yeah, I've lost jobs because I stood for what was right. My career was affected because I stood for what was right. But I've arrested police officers. So that when I was in New Orleans. So there are ones who will do what's right. But the way to get more people to do the right thing is when they do the right thing that goes against the norm, they need support from their own.
I actually want to ask you guys.
Go ahead, Anthony. Go ahead.
Something that popped, a couple things that popped. So first, just historically, I know I threw out the, people, we have to remember that, certain pilots and people in the military obviously are citizens. They may not bomb. But you also look at history, and certain nations have the populace has gone insane. Look at Nazi Germany. There were a lot of people there that just followed the party line, and like a brain virus did horrible things in the name of, well, the authority told me I have to do X, Y, and Z. So I don't want to discount that. And I kind of want to get your guys' thought on that. And I think it's actually interesting because I think that, like Johnny mentioned, the makeup of our military definitely is changing. And we hear a lot of like military guys talk about it, how you're seeing people in power positions because they're DEI, pushed up the ladder. We have transgender, people who are representing us to other nations. diversity hires infiltrating not just the military, but a lot of other areas, and is being pushed heavily. And then I guess the main thing I wanted to hit on is I'm curious what because you have kids and you're raising young men, and the generation that's coming up behind us who is probably going to make up a large collection or makeup of the military. It's interesting to see what their thoughts are, because we're seeing the military is having a hard time recruiting. Serving our country is becoming less and less interesting. And I don't know if that's just because of the politics of what's going on in the military, or they're just not interested at all. I guess I'm curious what your guys' thought about that is, not only of like, people will follow what the authoritarians tell them sometimes, and we've definitely seen that happen in history, but also the concern of like the next generation coming up that's probably going to be making a lot of these decisions very soon.
Well, and it's a challenge. Like often the outliers within any group, they get the attention. About a year ago, the U.S. Navy had found a cross-dressing pervert it was a dude that would dress up like a woman and do drag shows. And to be super clear, I don't give a cat's poot tootie what you do in your own time. Like, I really don't. Like, I've got, be free. This is America. Leave kids out of it, and maybe leave your perversion out of your military job. And the Navy found this out, and they embraced him and hired him to be a spokesperson and a PR rep to present the U.S. Navy to young people. There's going to be a challenge and a pushback on that. The Navy also had a thumbs up bump with their recruitment when the new Top Gun Maverick movie came out. They did see a bump in young people trying to get in. A friend of mine, a friend of all of ours who's been in the military 20 plus years, the other day told me, he said, there is no reason that any young person right now should ever join the military. And he was dead serious about that. And he's in position to know, because of the nonsense, because of in their training, rather than learning, I don't know about survival and how to operate whatever systems they're working on, it's DEI and pronoun training. The U.S. Army is going to spend in the billions this year on pronoun training. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a challenge. They cannot meet their recruitment basics. They can't get to the bottom line of recruitment. It is a challenge. My son is in he's 21, and we had a conversation the other day about the military. And it's really interesting how different things are, Jared, from when we were kids. I was pumping my fist and screaming Wolverine when the first Red Dawn came out. And I was pumping my fist and saying down with the USSR when the documentary Rocky IV came out and Rocky beat the Russian, and things have changed.
I think, yeah, a lot of things have changed, including the way parents parent in the home. When we had parents, they didn't, at least I can speak on behalf of my parents, they didn't care if they were my best friend or if I considered them that. You did what you were supposed to, or there were consequences and you were held accountable. That's not the way it is in a lot of this country right now. They're more interested in being buddies and making shorts together and, twinning and all that crazy stuff. Like it starts in the home. It really does. We've lost morals in this country, and it shows. It's being put out on display for the whole world to see. We're not as tough as we were as a country. We're not as tough as we were as a society. And I'll go out on a limb and say a lot of the homes aren't as tough as they used to be to grow up in, and it has an effect.
Yeah, and I mean it's a good thing. Anthony's much younger than us, and it's a good thing because he doesn't have to live on
a lot younger.
You are a lot younger. You were a handsome,
so much younger.
It's good though, but your knees work and your back works, and it's
yeah,
good.
You're right.
My generation, Generation X, we lived in fear of our parents, and we are not glorifying, and we're not having some false sense of memory. Oh, back in my day, no, back in our day, we got the switch, we got the belt, we got the back of the hand. A friend of mine, we were talking yesterday that they have 2 kids, her and her husband and 2 kids, and every night there are 4 meals served in their home. Each person, like it's a restaurant, gets to eat what we had 1 meal. And if you didn't like that freaking hamburger helper and a glass of milk, that there's no other option. We have gotten soft. China has spent the last 30 years sharpening their swords and building super carriers, and we have finely tuned our pronouns. My name is Johnny. I'm a Zer, they, them. And I think it's a challenge on so many different levels. Jared brings up the home. We could also bring up kicking God out of the school and go from there and open that box up. It's a lot. The bottom line is we're less safe than we used to be. Heavy topics today. I'm going to throw a wrench into this mix, and this is just for fun. No one is going to be holding any of us accountable. And these are just opinions, and this is just for fun. Put your tinfoil hats on, people. There's new reports coming out of the Peruvian rainforest, out of the Amazonian basin in Peru, of the Peruvian face peelers. And the bottom line is something is going on in the Amazonian forests. Now,
Is that a football team?
that is not a football team. It is allegedly
They
men
just traded for Tom Brady.
men clad in black flying on hoverboards coming through villages for abductions. And there has been enough noise about what's going on in Peru that Americans have gone down there. And I've been watching podcasts. It's just for fun, y'all. It's just for fun. But there's some serious stuff going on. Here's my point about mentioning this. Over the last 20 years, we keep seeing videos released by the U.S. Navy. It's always over water. It's always over the ocean. The U.S. Navy showing, and the White House. I don't know if we really trust the White House, but the White House has given a thumbs up. Yes, these are true. The Pentagon has said, yes, these are true. We see machines that can make right-hand turns, 90-degree turns, at 600 miles an hour, that can accelerate at a rate that would liquefy the human body. Occam's razor says that we must accept the easiest example or the easiest reason. So we do know there's ships that fly. We know the Peruvian face peelers are flying on hoverboards. It's really cool what they can do. They have these silent discs that go on their feet and they can jump houses with this technology. Okay, all that to say this. We know this. Occam's razor says, okay, are these aliens or other beings or the Nephilim or biblical stuff? I don't know, probably people. Jared, where are you at with my presupposition? I'm going to posit to the group that whether it be military, paramilitary, or a higher level of elitism, because I think BlackRock does more for this country, against this country, than the White House does. I think there's other organizations. I think there's technology. I think the U.S. Navy just showing over and over these flying things, this technology. How far out there do you think, separated from what we have, the military has?
Oh, a lot. We usually get something released to the public probably 10, 15 years after the military's kind of done using it, like night vision, stuff like that. I don't remember his name, but there was a gentleman who was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he used to work at what's the place in Pahrump, Nevada, the base drawing of
Area 51.
Area 51. He used to work there, and he tells that they have a ship there that they've recovered, and they're reverse engineering stuff. There's that guy's been on, talking about a bunch of things. He worked in the military for 20 years there. So yeah, we would be naive to think we're the only ones in this big giant super space.
I'm not holding to this. This is just, and again, this is just for fun. I have a continuum of what I believe. There's certain things I do know that I know the CIA probably murdered JFK. And then, lo and behold, they said, yep, we did.
Probably.
They admitted it. So there's things that we know. And then there's Michelle Obama's penis. And there's a continuum somewhere in there of things that we know and things that are probable. Do you really think there might actually, like, honest to goodness, might actually be aliens? Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Anthony, where are you at? Maybe aliens? Is it fun to talk about? For me, it's fun to talk about.
Miami at the mall.
Yeah. I struggle with the alien thing because when the government starts pushing it very hard, I automatically tend to think it's BS.
I know. Wasn't it? It's like I've always said this. I believed in aliens until the White House said they were real. And now I'm like, no. I don't believe anything.
There's a lot of interesting concepts, and I was trying to Google it right now. I can't remember what it's specifically called. And I think Elon Musk has talked about it before, where the theory of like the infinite and expanding galaxy and the multiverses would naturally lead to a result where either one of two things are true. Either we are completely alone in this vast expanse, or there has been there are aliens based on like the mathematical probability. Essentially, it's a probability question. Like, since the universe is so expansive and there's so many multiverses, the probabilities would lead to there has to be at some point maybe an alien race that is so advanced that could reach us or has reached us, but we haven't seen that necessarily play out, at least not publicly. So then that would lead to the conclusion that we are alone, and which one is more scary to us, that we are completely alone in this, by absolute chance we are just completely alone. Now, I have my own religious beliefs, and there are some things that on my religious beliefs that naturally conflict with the concept that there is maybe an alien race out there that's contacting us. I think that there's other things going on. I think it's government, hidden tech. I think there's other nations going on. And I think a lot of the stuff maybe we find also is maybe just a product of, like, a lot of people tend to think like anthropology and archaeology is this infallible science, but it is like highly fallible. I mean, archaeology in itself, and things like carbon dating, people would get mad at me about saying this stuff, but it's not a perfect science like they like to claim it is. And we find stuff all the time that completely upends timelines that we have set, and thousands of academic articles have been written about, like, this is the absolute truth about how this history played out. And just for them to find some sort of archaeological site 10 years later that completely just debunks all the things that they said. So I don't know, the aliens are fun. Do I necessarily think aliens are real? I think there's a shot. Do I think they've made contact with us? No, I don't. I think it's probably government stuff going on, and things behind the veil that they don't like to tell us is going on.
And I think for me, it's fun having these conversations with people that are sane. I think it's fun to just go, hey, because so often these kind of topics are, some folks know that show, was it Something Across America, the spooky show that's on in the middle of the night. It's a radio show that's been on for decades.
Art Bell, right?
Yeah.
Art
It's
Bell,
been on forever. Something Across America.
What's radio? I don't understand. What's radio?
Ladies and gentlemen, please ignore the guy in California. He is too young to even know what the 90s were.
So big time out. Who's listening to the radio like at night, listening to this Across America thing? Johnny,
when I would go,
when you can't sleep because you're so old you can't sleep. Johnny's
no, this radio show's been around forever, but it is so spooky, and these folks are way out there. And in my mind, they all wear cargo pants and have grizzled beards. And it's so much fun, and it's fun to listen to, but to actually sit down with people that are sane and go, hey, you know what? I think the government's a bunch of freaking liars. I think that there are powers, and I don't mean spooky powers in the sky, but like humans, people that F over our world. Jared, you find it?
Yeah, so the one I was referring to is Coast to Coast.
Coast to Coast AM. Yeah, it was on from like 3 to 6 a.m. every night. And many mornings I'd get up to go fish, and I'd get like a 2-hour solid window of people that didn't say, maybe there's aliens or maybe it's, military tech. They were all the way like little green men. And it's fantastic to talk about.
I'm looking at what
do you guys think there's a higher probability that this is, now we're getting off, aliens or ghosts? Like, what is their higher probability of?
All right. Well, science talks about this. It talks about that because we currently are in a 4-dimensional world: height, length, breadth, and space-time continuum. So we know about the 4. There's a pretty good theories that we're up to 10, 11, or 12 dimensions. So there's other dimension, and there's theorists. They say this with wars. To the theologian, all wars are about ideology. To the economist, all wars are about finance. To the military might, all wars are about territory, strength, and might. So we all have our own framework or reference that we look at things with. So when you say, hey, what about ghosts? What about aliens? Well, to the theologian, we're going to go to the spiritual realm. Yeah. To the mathematician, we're going to jump over to a different one, not just four dimensions. There's another. So it's going to be math or science. And I think it's a big scrambled egg of mess. There's some really interesting, this is just for fun, y'all, but there is some really interesting ideas about that Bigfoot is not a simian that lives in North America, but is an interdimensional traveling beast? I don't know. I just love hearing about it.
Yeah.
So you say, hey, what about ghosts? What about aliens? I don't know. What if there's really 37 dimensions, and there's a spiritual dimension, and there's a dimension called heaven? I don't know, but I love talking about it. For me, see what you guys think about this. As long as the conversation ends with a question mark and it's not definitive, Jared, you've heard me say this before, it drives me crazy when people say, this is the way it is. By God, I saw me a Bigfoot the other day. I'm like, no, you were bombed out on Budweiser. As long as it ends in a question mark and you can shrug your shoulders and go, I don't know, it's fun. Jared, do you love the question mark?
Yeah, because it gives you something to talk about. It gives you an ability to hear other people's opinions. But yeah, like, I don't know. I guess to say that, I don't know. Is there a ghost in my home? I don't know.
I do not
in your home specifically.
One in my home. I do not believe in ghosts. I love talking about Bigfoot. I do believe there's a possibility, maybe there's a possibility that there's civilizations in the ocean. I don't know. I think way up on the probable list is that there is tech out there that we have no idea. I opened with the Peruvian face peelers. The bottom line is that there are people out there, and they're an agrarian culture. They're not peasants. One of the little girls that was being interviewed was wearing a shirt out in the jungle that said TikTok on it. I mean, they're not total, complete Stone Age peasants. These are regular people that just happen to be agrarian. They all said the same thing. These dudes could fly with their shoes. And somebody goes, hey, remember at Bastille Day last year in France, they really got that hoverboard. That dude came out and did a full demonstration. The tech is here with hoverboard, and now we've got people in the rainforest. Jared, what'd you pull up?
I was just trying to learn more about the Peruvian face peelers, because
it is a wild journey
all over the place.
Yeah, and you're going to see things that what actually took place were these gold miners that are just illegally gold mining, and that's what the government said. If the government says it, I choose not to believe it. Anthony, final word on Peruvian face peelers or being pissed off at politicians.
I'll have to look into Peruvian face peelers, but the only thing I wanted to say on the side is, because you mentioned Bigfoot, I have an uncle who swears that in his 20s, he was here in California. I'm kind of by the foothills. There's a lot of Indian reservations. And he was driving with one of his friends up to the Indian reservation. And they swear, and he's said it his whole life. And he's not one of those people that he's a very logical person, but he swears that him and his friend saw Bigfoot run in front of them. And he swears that it was not a bear. He's a hunter. He knows. I don't know. It's funny. Like when people make those types of claims, I'm like, do I really believe you? But I kind of believe this guy. But do I really think Bigfoot is out there? I don't know. So yes, don't trust the government. The government sucks.
Jared, final word on Peruvian face peelers and being pissed at the government.
Government sucks as a whole throughout any length of time, and I would love to start an NFL team called the Peruvian Face Peelers.
Today's episode of Peruvian Face Peeling here on the Liberty Lounge, brought to you by blackoutcoffee.com/liberty. On behalf of Anthony the Armed Scholar, on behalf of Guns and Gadgets, I almost said Guns and Gadgets Johnny B, but your name is Jared. My name is Johnny B. However y'all found us, we are glad you did. Thanks for being a part of this. We'll see you soon.